Hi everybody. Today we're going to be focusing on mathematical properties. Our learning goal is to be able to perform operations with multi-digit whole numbers. In order to be able to do that thoroughly, one of the things we need to be able to do is use the properties to solve problems. Here are the properties themselves. You'll notice that some of them are very similar. In this first box, we have the properties of addition. The commutative property of addition tells us the order of the addends changes, but the sum stays the same. So first we add 12 plus 7. Then we can change to 7 plus 12. Our numbers didn't change, just the order we wrote them. Then we have the associative property of addition, which says if the groupings of the addends changes, the sum stays the same. Here we have a 5, an 8, and a 14. You'll notice the 8 and the 14 are grouped together in the parentheses. On the other side of the equal sign, we still have a 5, an 8, and a 14, but the parentheses have changed. Now the 5 and the 8 are grouped. Notice that the order of the actual addends did not change like they did in the commutative property. We also have the identity property of addition. That one's pretty easy. Just says the sum of any number and 0 is that number. Now we can move on to the properties of multiplication. First, the commutative property of multiplication. Just like addition, it's the order that changes. So if the order of the factors changes, the product stays the same. It doesn't matter if we have 4 times 9 or 9 times 4. The answer, or the product, is still going to be 36. The associative property again says the grouping of the factors can change. The product will stay the same. So we have 11 times 3 times 6. Notice the 3 and the 6 are grouped in parentheses. Then we have 11 times 3 times 6. The factors are in the exact same order, but now the 11 and the 3 are grouped with parentheses. And then the identity property of multiplication says that any product of a number and 1 is that number. Last is the distributive property. That tells us that multiplying a sum by a number is the same as multiplying each addend by the number and then adding the product. For example, if I distribute this 5 to the 7 and to the 9, it becomes 5 times 7 plus 5 times 9. I just distributed the 5 to the 7 and to the 9 to add to get the final product. Since there's a pencil on this page, you know you're going to be pausing and writing something. Use the foldable you were given in class to write in each example of the properties. Why do we use these properties, you ask? Well, a lot of times it makes it easier for mental math. For example, if somebody asked you to quickly add 19 plus 25 plus 11 in your head, if you're anything like me, you might have a hard time with it. But you can change the order to make it easier to add in your head. If you go ahead and change it to 19 plus 11, those come together easily. You get the nice round number of 30. Then, mentally, you can add 30 plus 25 pretty easily in your head to get 55. The commutative property of addition allows us to reorder the addends. Here's another example for mental math. Let's say someone asked you to tell them the product of 4 times 28, but without writing anything down. This might not be so easy to compute in your head, but the distributive property allows you to break up a number into 2 numbers as long as their sum equals the original number. So instead of 4 times 28, you could break this apart into 4 times 20 plus, don't forget that plus, 4 times 8. Well, 4 times 20 is a nice round number, 80. 8 times 4, if you know your basic facts, and you should, is 32. That's easier to compute in your head. 80 plus 32 is 112. Will this make it easier? Yes. Does that mean it's super easy for everybody to compute in their heads? No, but it is a trick to make things easier for mental math. The properties just help us that way. All right, now I'm going to make you use your brain. Don't freak out. I'm not going to make you write all this down. But I do want you to pause the video and take a few minutes to think about where each of these number sentences would fall into this chart. Challenge yourself to see if you can figure out which property was used in each. Well, how do you think you did? I'm going to give you the answers and you can kind of rate yourself. For me, I'm all about working smarter, not harder. So I'm going to start with the properties I feel like are the easiest. Those are the identity properties. I'm going to start with the identity property of addition because that's the one that said the sum of any number in 0 is that number. I can see here 8 plus 0 equals 8. That's our identity property of addition. The other identity property is the identity property of multiplication, and that's the one that says the product of any number and 1 is that number. Here it is. 4 times 1 equals 4. Now for me, the next easiest is the commutative property. So let's look for the commutative property of addition. Remember, that's the one that says the order of the addends can change, but the sum stays the same. So let's look for where they change the order of numbers. Here it is. 6 plus 13 plus 5 equals 6 plus 5 plus 13. All the addends stayed the same, but the order changed. Then we have the commutative property of multiplication. Very similar, the order of the factors changes, but the product stays the same. Here it is. 2 times 9 is equal to 9 times 2. Even when I change the order of those factors, my product's still going to be 18. That takes us to the associative property. The associative property of addition, our addends are going to stay the same, but our grouping is going to change. And I find that where here, now the 2 and the 28 are grouped instead of the 28 and the 14. And lastly, associative property of multiplication. First, they grouped the 12 and the 3, and then they grouped the 3 and the 2. Factors stayed in the same order, just grouping changed. How'd you do? All right, it's that time again to summarize with your LOL. Go ahead and make that line under your notes in your journal and explain how you could mentally find 8 times 45 by using the distributive property. Now you can actually solve this in your line of learning, but you also need to write your answer in your math journal using math vocabulary and complete sentences. You need to be able to explain your thinking and solve things. Good luck!